IVM.
Hello and welcome to the Habit Coach Podcast, the bite-sized podcast filled with quick and easy, actionable habits. Remember, great habits create that awesome life. I am Ashdin Doctor, your habit coach. And today's fun fact of the day has to do with Buddhism. Did you know that Buddhism describes 8 types of suffering? Suffering is one of the most important concepts of Buddhism. It is part of the fundamental truths, and the way out of suffering is through the eightfold path. Buddhism goes very deep into suffering, as it is almost an essence of life. Let me tell you the 8 types of suffering. The first is birth. The second, old age. The third, sickness. Fourth is death. Fifth, which is coming across what is not desirable. Sixth, not being able to hold on to what is desirable. 7, not getting what we want. And 8, which is called general misery. I absolutely love this list because it highlights some beautiful human traits like loss, greed, death, life, sickness, and old age. And for most people, a list of 8 like this is hard to remember. Hence, they can be broken down into what are called the 3 types of categories. The suffering of suffering, which is the first. This includes your birth, old age, sickness, death, and coming across what is not desirable. What is interesting here is that these are things beyond your control. These are things that beyond your control cause suffering. They can be natural processes like sickness, like old age. It can be something like a pandemic that we're going through, which is not desirable and is external to us. The second kind of category of suffering is called suffering of change. Not being able to hold on to what is desirable. Not getting what we want. And this to me is one of the most fundamental reasons for why we put ourselves through suffering. Even in Vedanta, they talk about this. Stress is born through our desires. Desire to retain what we have, and the desire to have something that we don't have. Think about it, just how much of our life is spent resisting change. The third is the final all-pervasive suffering, or general misery. The saddest suffering of all. This is the suffering born from a dissatisfaction with everything. When we live in the state of things never being good enough, living in our past or living in our future, or living in fear or living in distrust. This is the kind of suffering we see so much on our social media, on our news channels. As your habit coach, I want you to move away from as many of these sufferings as possible, accepting things that we cannot change and changing the things that we can, and living a beautiful, fulfilled life. So much of what I put out in the Habit Coach podcast is about taking control of your life and moving away from suffering to a state of joy. I really want you to be living in this state of joy. The paradox, however, is that in order to live in a state of joy, you first have to go through the experience and learn how to suffer. If you suffer, you have to suffer correctly. Your suffering should be of some use, or else what's the point of just suffering blindly? Through suffering, you can learn the value of those happy moments, those moments of peace, those moments of joy. It gives you a benchmark to compare yourself to. For example, if you don't have a headache right now, you are in a state of calm. You do not even realize that you have a head. But as soon as you do have a headache, this calm goes away. Suddenly your world is in pain and you recognize that your head exists. Then once your headache goes away, you feel relief and a sense of joy comes back. But through suffering, you can learn about compassion. You can begin to feel the pain of somebody else. And once you've suffered, you can understand what the other person must be going through. And that is when you can use kindness. You can help, or if not help, at least appreciate what the person is going through with kindness. All this would have been impossible to do without going through suffering. And hence suffering is essential to live a fulfilled life. It is essential for finding joy and kindness in the world. Suffering is essential for finding those moments of peace. So your simple habit starts by first accepting the suffering. Then ask yourself, what is this suffering teaching me? What have I learned from it? Have I learned that I have a head and that it doesn't hurt more often than it does? Finally, learn to get rid of that suffering. Move from that suffering to a place of joy, peace, and love. This process will be much easier once you've learned what this suffering has come to teach you. Suffering is not bad. Suffering is essential for growth. After all, almost all suffering is nothing but change. So start these habits and share with us your progress using the hashtag #TheHabitCoach. If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, I am Ashdin Doc on Twitter and Instagram. You can find lots more information on my website, awesome180.com, or check out different content on my YouTube channel called AWESOME180. That's Awesome 180.
I hope you enjoyed that show. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money. So it's been a really fun week this week. We've had a great episode with Anand Neelakantan on Cyrus Says. Anand was one of the writers of Bahubali, and it's done some really fun stuff since that. Ashish Vidyarthi also had a really good episode on his show, Begin the Journey. Please do check that out. You do know Yuddha is back, right? Definitely check it out if you haven't. Yuddha is our show about Indian ancient warfare. It's hosted by Anirudh Kanisetti and Aditya Ramanathan. Really great show. You should check that out for sure. And I forgot. Rishikesh was on the network as well. He was on Absolutely Right with Aditi Sarana. Do definitely check that out. With that, hope to see you next week.
Beta, did you know 79% of all scientists in NASA are Indian only?
देखो, इंडिया में टैक्स सिर्फ मिडिल क्लास भरती है. Everyone is just enjoying free यार.
आजकल के youngsters are only interested in partying and enjoying. उनको देश की पड़ी ही नहीं है.
बेटा तुम बस शादी कर लो, उसके बाद तो you can enjoy life like anything.
I will tell you what this country needs. This country needs 15 years of dictatorship. That is the only way to become a superpower. See the Chinese, how much they've progressed.
सुनो, तुमने ये WhatsApp forward देखा?
So what's common between all of these statements?
They're all absolutely rubbish.
Fake WhatsApp forwards that spread like wildfire.
And statements that defy any logic.
We are here to debunk them all.
Way of family WhatsApp groups, worst nightmare. Where what happens when you read a book.
Basically, we're just a bunch of guys who want to cut through the bullshit of everyone saying this, how it won't be true.
So that the next time someone confidently squeezes out some WhatsApp or Twitter BS, you can look them dead in the eye and go, Uncle, please sit.
So join me, Joel.
And me, Tushar.
Every Mondays for a fresh new episode of Uncle, Please Sit.